Tonight,
you need to resolve the core issues.
New details reveal the contours of a U.S. plan for peace in the Middle East.
We can only imagine what role the Iranians might be playing.
This as links surface between Venezuela and Iran-based terror groups. As the crisis and violence persist in the country.
The Attorney General of the United States of America was not telling the truth.
And a bar fight. Congress and the Attorney General at odds. This after a new report reveals a U.S. undercover agent's meeting with an aide from the 2016 Trump campaign.
Joe Biden represents the status quo.
Plus why a former Trump campaign aide thinks Biden is the president's best bet.
All this and more tonight on Faith Nation.
Parts of President Trump's Mideast peace plan are starting to unfold. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm John Jessup.
And I'm Jenna Browder. The long-awaited Middle East peace plan is taking shape.
President Trump's son-in-law and advisor Jared Kushner just gave a glimpse of their recommendations to help end the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. CBN's White House correspondent Ben Kennedy joins us for a sneak peek. Ben?
John, Jenna, Kushner says they developed a detailed plan that addresses core issues of the age-old dispute, adding that President Trump was hands-on and that people will be, quite frankly, surprised with what is in it. But in the proposal, he did stop short of releasing too many details, but did add that it could lead to a breakthrough in Middle East peace.
What we will be able to put together is a solution that we believe is a good starting point.
That starting point aims to get both the Israelis and Palestinians to talk.
What I see in the region is that the big divide now is you have leaders that are trying to empower their people and create more opportunity for them to have a better life, and then you have leaders that are trying to repress their people and often using religion and other excuses as a reason to try and hold their people down.
While Kushner calls the proposal detailed, it's unclear if any of those details include anything resembling a two-state solution.
What we want to do is put something out that we think is based on logic, where unquestionably we can say that this will lead to the Palestinian people living a much better life.
The challenge lies with connecting to the Palestinian Authority leaders, who cut off diplomatic ties after President Trump recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital.
We see this as, Israel's a very special country. It's the only democracy in the region. It's America's strongest ally.
And as its strongest ally, their security in the deal is a top priority.
I don't think anyone will question, if we do ask Israel to make compromises in our proposal, that we're going to ask them to do things that would put them at risk security-wise. I don't think the president would he would not take decisions himself that he would think would put America and the people who he represents at risk, and he wouldn't expect another leader to do that.
Kushner says the plan offers the Palestinians positive business solutions with economic incentives.
When we looked at the Palestinians, we said, well, what are the opportunities that they can have? What's been holding them back economically?
Now we'll get to see the full scope of that proposal very soon. The plan is set to be released following the conclusion of the Muslim holiday of Ramadan, which ends in early June. John, Jenna?
Thanks, Ben. Well, after a week of unrest in Venezuela, the future of the people there appears as uncertain as ever.
This is the White House doubles down on support of installing a democratic government in place of a dictator who refuses to let go of power. CBN News national security correspondent Eric Phillips has more on the challenges that lie ahead. Eric?
Well, John and Jenna, by all accounts, this week's uprising in Venezuela was not successful. Those who study turbulent governments, however, say this week may have just been a battle, not the war.
Caracas seems almost normal now. A stark contrast to days ago. 4 people killed and hundreds injured in a revolt led by self-proclaimed interim president Juan Guaido. He and supporters trying to topple leader Nicolas Maduro and hold a fair election. The effort, though energetic, proved unsuccessful, at least for now. But Michael O'Hanlon with the Brookings Institution says that could change.
There's no algorithm, there's no science to predicting what's going to happen next. It's a test of will, it's a test of loyalty of institutions, and it's a test at some level of the humaneness of the leader, who we already know is not really humane.
O'Hanlon says it's important for the U.S. to build more support for a Venezuelan democracy, with neighboring countries.
We need the Colombias, the Brazils, the Chiles, the Argentinas, even the Ecuadors and Bolivias if we can, and Mexico. And so developing a strategy that makes whatever happens a unified Western Hemisphere action.
Especially considering the support Maduro is likely getting from Iran, as discussed on CBN's 700 Club.
We can only imagine what role the Iranians might be playing in providing logistics, weapons, technical support to Maduro, and what that could potentially mean for the rest of the continent, and no less for the United States.
In Washington, 4 people were arrested Thursday when pro-Guaido protesters squared off against Maduro supporters at the Venezuelan embassy. Meanwhile, the United States is not backing off.
The brutal repression of the Venezuelan people must end, and it must end soon.
According to the White House, during a phone call Friday, the president reiterated that to Russian President Vladimir Putin, who supports Maduro.
The president is continuing to push for aid to be delivered to those people. Beyond that, I don't have any updates, but all options continue to be on the table.
So when asked if there would be any timetable for military intervention, the White House has declined to comment on that, only saying that right now the emphasis is on diplomacy and providing aid to the people of Venezuela. John and Jenna.
Thank you, Eric. Well, here at home, a new report reveals the FBI sent an undercover agent to track the 2016 Trump campaign.
Yeah, that is Democrats and Republicans clash over where to focus. Now that special counsel Robert Mueller's Russia report is complete. Senior Washington correspondent Jennifer Wishon explains.
Attorney General William Barr proved himself an adept navigator of the law on Capitol Hill this week, but Democrats aren't satisfied. This as we learned the FBI assigned an undercover agent to observe the Trump campaign in 2016. Now that the Mueller report is complete, in an interview with Fox News, President Trump says it's time for Congress to move on.
I would say it's done.
The Trump administration is turning its focus to how the probe got started to begin with. Attorney General Barr has assigned a team at the Justice Department to help him review the timeline. And today, the New York Times reports an FBI investigator, described as an attractive blonde woman, using the name Azra Turk, posed as a research assistant to observe Trump campaign advisor George Papadopoulos. The revelation shows the lengths the FBI took to find out if the Trump campaign was aiding Russia in its election meddling, and gives fuel to the Trump administration's claims they were spied on during the campaign. Meanwhile, Democrats are fuming after Barr refused to testify before the House Judiciary Committee Thursday. He made that decision after learning committee attorneys rather than members of Congress would be questioning him. When Barr didn't show, Congressman Steve Cohen brought in a ceramic chicken on a bucket of KFC. It drew laughs, but the committee chairman threatens to hold Barr in contempt.
We cannot permit him or anybody in the administration to dictate the manner in which we function.
Speaker Nancy Pelosi says Barr lied about his dialogue with the Mueller team.
The Attorney General of the United States of America was not telling the truth to the Congress of the United States. That's a crime.
But the Justice Department calls Pelosi's accusation reckless, irresponsible, and false. And it's not just Barr the Democrats are targeting. Chairman Nadler and others want to hear from a number of key witnesses in the Mueller report, like former White House counsel Dan McGahn. But the president is reserving his right to block their testimony. The president says the Mueller report should be the final word. But for Democrats, it's a new starting point. Jennifer Wishon, CBN News, Washington.
Thanks, Jennifer. Well, amid the political firestorm, today a big bright spot, the U.S. economy is shining. With 263,000 new jobs added in April, employers have more open positions now than workers available to fill them. And as companies compete, wages are growing. Higher pay, low inflation, and low borrowing rates are pushing the U.S. economy forward. Unemployment now is still falling at 3.6%, the lowest level in 50 years.
And here now for more are Jonathan Swan of Axios and CBN News Chief Political Analyst David Brody. Both of you, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Jonathan, let's start with you. The hour-long phone call between President Trump and his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin. White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders said that the two touched very briefly on the Mueller report. What does that signify to you?
It signifies
very little to me. I was with the president in Helsinki when he had his infamous press conference with Vladimir Putin. Look, I don't think it's a secret that Trump has never really bought into even though his intelligence community has said to him, Russia interfered in the election, Trump has always seen it through the prism of his own victory, and any mention of the fact that Russia interfered, Trump sees as an attack on the legitimacy of his victory. So he's never going to bring it up in a conversation with Putin. He's never going to hammer him. He's never going to say, don't do it again in 2020. It's just not within his DNA. So it doesn't surprise me at all that they would have brushed over it. My guess, and I wasn't on the phone call, but my guess is that they both spent a lot of time enjoying the conclusion that there was no collusion and mocking Trump's political opponents.
Jonathan, you're one of the best reporters. I thought you really would have been on that phone call.
If you know how, let me know. Let me know.
David, he's getting a lot of flack, though, the president is, for not raising election meddling with President Putin. Is that troublesome?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. Look, I mean, I agree with Jonathan. There's a reason why he's not bringing it up, right? He doesn't think any of this has any merits any discussion or warrants any more further discussion. But sure, I mean, he's going to get dinged for it. And think about it. If it was Obama and this was the situation, you think Republicans, I mean, they would be ripping Obama left and right. You didn't bring it up. Russia interfered with our election, and you didn't bring it up. So sure, I mean, I think there's some warranted criticism of the president. But look, I think Donald Trump's always looking to make a deal. I think he sees Putin not necessarily as a positive or negative guy, just a guy that maybe I can, whether it be I can strike a deal on trade or something along those lines. You know, he wants to always keep his options open. Art of the deal.
David, Senator Elizabeth Warren used the phone call as another reason to cite impeachment, maybe for the both of you, but starting with David, how will that play on the campaign trail?
Well, it may play well for a little bit on the campaign trail, but it's not going to matter. It's not going to amount to a hill of beans. I mean, I think that's what you do. You know, you wake up every morning as a Democrat candidate for president and you say impeachment. I mean, that's pretty much like the playbook. But I don't think it has legs much at all.
And let's shift gears here a little bit to this New York Times report, Jonathan, that the FBI sent someone to spy, essentially, on the Trump campaign. What do you make of this? Was it, in fact, spying, as the president has said? Is he somewhat vindicated?
Well, the word spying has no, I mean, it's an English word, right? I mean, the only dispute is whether it's a pejorative or not, right? So we know that there was surveillance of the campaign, and the only question is whether it was legitimate or not. I think the way we should view this is the start of a second investigation. We've been through an investigation, and now you have people like Lindsey Graham, the Senate Judiciary Chairman. Lindsey told me himself, Senator Graham told me that when he was playing golf with the president in Florida the weekend they found out about the Mueller conclusions, he promised the president that he would investigate the investigators, okay? Then you also have Bill Barr, the new Attorney General, who also wants to investigate the investigators, and you have some support in the House from the minority, Jim Jordan, Mark Meadows. So we're going to see these investigations happen, and you know, this is the very, very early part of it. So I think this has certainly a long way to go.
Certainly a long way to go. And just following on the tails of that, what do you think Attorney General Bill Barr will find as he investigates the beginnings of these investigations?
Well, I mean, obviously, he's not quite sure because bottom line is, was it predicated? Absolutely predicated. Those are his words. You know, was it warranted, in other words? And I think that's really the bottom line on that. But don't forget, Jonathan listed a litany of things. What about the Michael Horowitz report as well, that IG report coming at the end of June that looks into FISA abuses? I mean, that seems to be potentially a big enchilada here as well. So you put all of that together, and I agree. I think it's a second chapter coming here. And I know the Sean Hannitys of the world and others have been barking up this tree, if you will, for a long time. But I do think this is now something that is going to have to be paid attention to, as we saw in the New York Times actually doing an above-the-fold story on it. And that's all I got.
That's all you got?
I mean, would you like me to say more? I would be more than happy to.
Well, the DOJ Inspector General, as you just mentioned, Michael Horowitz, already involved in that investigation. Did you say that that's supposed to come out at the
end of June?
Right?
I think it's late June.
Well, what about the infamous Steele dossier? What more do we have to say as far as the focus of that investigation? Will that also be incorporated in the Horowitz investigation or Bill Barr's investigation?
Well, that's a good question. probably Bill Barr's investigation. I'm not sure about the, well, actually, it would be part of Horowitz's as well if it was used as a reason to get the FISA warrant to begin with. So, look, is it Russian disinformation? That's what the Republicans will tell you. That's potentially what Trump will tell you. But I think there's a lot more to that. We don't know at this point.
Jonathan, you are known in Washington for the scoops that you get. What stories are we not talking about that we should be?
Well, I think one that's sort of bubbling under the surface that I'm very focused on is Iran and what the Trump administration is doing with Iran. The Iranian economy has been tanking. It's incredible to see the value of their currency plummeting. The effects of these sanctions are really starting to bite in Iran. So the question then becomes, and you look ahead, and certainly the administration is aware of this, how does the Iranian regime respond to this? Do they get increasingly desperate as their economy starts to contract? They've got natural disasters. Believe it or not, locusts is a problem they're facing, floods. So it's this sort of biblical setting. We're on Christian radio, Christian TV, right. But I'm a big Jew. But we've got locusts, floods, economic catastrophe, and a revolutionary regime, and the US just squeezing them. And I think that is this incredible confluence of events, and it's very unpredictable what will happen.
Yeah, we were just talking earlier about the waivers that have been discontinued on Iranian oil.
Yes.
To see how that might play out for Iran, whether it causes them to become belligerent or if it constrains them.
Well, the administration is certainly acutely aware and I wouldn't say expecting, but certainly aware of the fact that they might lash out and get desperate because oil is their, it's one of their main revenue streams, and they really are choking it off now. They've ended the waivers.
Well, Jonathan Swan and David Brody, thank you guys so much for your
insight.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, when we come back, a former top Trump campaign aide wants Joe Biden for the 2020 ticket. Jason Miller on the president's best bet next.
Welcome back. It may sound counterintuitive, but a former top Trump campaign aide is betting on Biden.
That's right. Jason Miller says he's the president's best bet that goes against the grain of the conventional wisdom here in Washington. CBN chief political analyst David Brody once again sat down with Miller this week.
Explain why you think Joe Biden might be actually the perfect guy that Trump can defeat in 2020.
Well, I'll take you back a little bit to the very first phone call that I had with Jared Kushner, where he told me that before I joined the president's campaign in 2016, where I should take everything that I'd learned in the previous 20 years of politics and throw it out the window. Forget everything and you have to learn to adapt and understand this counterintuitive, unconventional environment. Here's the reason why Joe Biden is the perfect opponent for Donald Trump going to 2020, and why, as a strong Trump supporter, I would rather President Trump face Joe Biden than literally any other candidate in the Democratic field. Here's why. You can't look at it in the context of where does someone fit on the ideological spectrum, the moderate, the liberal, the conservative. That's the conventional Washington way of thinking. When you look at President Trump, he is a change agent. He was elected largely as a result of Americans wanting change. A change to the system, a change to the type of leaders that we elect, the change in the type of people who will go and actually accomplish what they're pledging to go and do. Joe Biden has many of the same challenges that Secretary Clinton did in 2016. Been in office for a long time, been a creature of Washington in New York for years, and in fact, Joe Biden will have a 47-year record that he's going to have to defend. And so the same playbook that President Trump was able to run against Secretary Clinton in 2016, a lot of that will still apply in 2020. And even though Secretary Clinton was probably the most disliked politician in modern American history to receive a nomination, the fact of the matter is that Joe Biden hasn't exactly knocked folks' socks off so far with the launch of his candidacy. There's small crowd sizes, there's a rather uninspiring launch, and again, for Donald Trump to win, even as the incumbent, he needs to be the change agent. Joe Biden represents the status quo and is essentially a bridge to the 1970s and 1980s.
Joe Biden can connect with voters. I don't think there's any question about that. And there's a book, The Politics of Voting by David Weston at Emory University, where he talks about the emotional connection. The guy you want to have a beer with is very important. So doesn't that help Joe Biden in a general election potentially? Because he's not necessarily like Hillary Clinton in that sense.
Well, while Joe Biden is more relatable than Secretary Clinton, and I would agree with you on that point, the fact of the matter is if you look at Joe Biden's previous runs for the president, you look at his run in 1988, where he flamed out on the plagiarism charges, you look at 2008, where he dropped out before they even got going in Iowa, now you look as we're heading into 2020, I don't see why we should expect that a candidate who is been unsuccessful in 2 previous presidential runs is now going to magically wake up at the age of 76 and become a good candidate on the campaign trail.
2020, okay, Biden, let's say he's the guy. Let's say that happens. But what happens if it's someone else? You know, Bernie Sanders, I mean, you know, how does that matchup potentially look? And what's your biggest concern about who could win the nomination? Like a young gun, the Buttigieg or the Beto O'Rourke. Open slate, far left liberal, but new generation, the energy, the change agent, that would, I would think, concern you to a degree, right?
Exactly, and that's what fits my philosophy, and that if President Trump is running against Joe Biden, it's a very similar playbook to Hillary Clinton on change versus the status quo, or moving forward versus moving in the past, and saying, why would we go back to that? With Bernie Sanders or an Elizabeth Warren, the ideological play much more comes into the front view, particularly the issue of socialism and the way that Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren embrace so many aspects of socialism, which, by the way, we're looking around the world in places like Venezuela and other places where in Cuba, where socialism does not work. Clearly, if we need an example, as a Trump ally, where I get most concerned about is running against a candidate with a complete blank slate, someone who can turn out crowds and excite Democrats. Think of a Kamala Harris, a Beto O'Rourke, Mayor Pete Buttigieg. Those candidates, to me, again, I think President Trump defeats all of them, but I think they're more formidable as opponents than Joe Biden.
Well, we have been putting him to work. One more story for you all from our CBN Chief Political Analyst, David Brody.
That's right. Today, David sat down with one of the most influential Christian evangelicals in the country. Here is Dr. James Dobson on the state of faith and politics in America.
You know, I have Christian people, conservative people who come up to me and say, well, what's he like? The truth of the matter is that he's much more of a gentleman than anybody knows he is, and he has kept every promise he made to the faith community. I really do love and appreciate that man. If that makes some people unhappy, I'm speaking for myself, not for my organization. But I'm extremely pleased, and I wish people would get off his back.
Has that surprised you at all with President Trump? A lot of folks didn't think he would fulfill many of these promises, but he seems to have gone above and beyond here.
He's exceeded all expectations and continues to do so. At the Rose Garden yesterday, he gave a wonderful talk about the religious beliefs and what the Constitution says about our freedom, the religious freedoms, and how he wants to protect them. And he has really done what he could. The Johnson administration kind of freed us to be more open with our faith in the media. But more than that, yesterday he announced legislation that he's supporting that would allow people in the medical community to live by their consciences and not violate them. And of course that relates to abortion and other things. So he's constantly looking for ways to promote the agenda, the things we believe in. He's the most pro-life president we have ever had, and continues to do so. And he's appointed more than 100 judges now. I couldn't be more pleased with him. Now, he's not a perfect man, but I'm not either. You know, and so we're just grateful for him being there, and I wish they would let him do his job.
I want to ask you 2 last questions about divisiveness and prayer in this country, but let me start with divisiveness. I mean, You've been around a little while here. What do you make of the state of our country in terms of the divisiveness on both sides, a lot of the vitriol, and some would say even President Trump, on Twitter at least, having some fun, or not some fun, but contributing to some of the divisiveness here in this country?
Well, I think that what has been happening in the last 2 years has never occurred before. The level of anger, the vitriol, the words, the things that were said. Some people blame that on President Trump because he can give it back. If you get on him, he'll give it back. But I think it's generated from those who really don't support the Judeo-Christian system of values, certainly pro-life and things related to it. And it's been a war. It really has. I mean, I can't imagine the president waking up every morning knowing he's going to be attacked again, probably over something not very fair. If I sound biased, it's because I really have strong feelings about this subject.
We need prayer. We all know that. We need a spiritual awakening, I'm sure, in this country. And I know it begins individually. But what should Americans, Christians, be praying for specifically as we're here in this 2019 era of Trump?
David, you hit on it. Really, we're desperately in need of a spiritual awakening, a spiritual renewal, a revival that would sweep across this country. And I don't think there's much else that will turn it around. We're just not going to all of a sudden agree with each other, and some of this hate that's out there is going to continue. I think it's a tool of Satan, frankly. We cannot be trying to hurt one another. It just doesn't work that way as a country. We're united. United we stand.
Well, tomorrow marks the kickoff of a major pro-life event in the heart of it all. In Times Square, massive screens will show thousands of 4D ultrasounds of a child in the womb, and it's all live from New York. Tune in Monday for our CBN News coverage of the event right here on Faith Nation.
Well, that's a wrap for tonight's Faith Nation.
Have a great weekend.